Hello, everyone! Welcome back to a series of tutorials by Whale Twins. Today, we continue with the marker points from the last class and continue to explain to you the interaction settings of the marker points. Actually, our markers are now defaulted too. Many interactions have already been, especially this one. The most important interaction is already there. For example, if I click on this marker point, and it will directly switch to it. First, we need to note that is the click and selection of the markers. Clicking and selecting needs to be switched to our none. We can test it in the non-editing mode. We can't test it in the editing mode. After we move it to the top and click, then it will switch to the whole. This interaction, we've already included it in the entire. When you place the punctuation marks, has been included, so you don't need to do any special settings. Let's take a look at the settings. First, we select this. As I said before, that is all the marking points. Its interaction and its styles are all set on our marking group. We click on the mark group, then click interaction. We can see that there is already one here. There is already one called Switch View on selecting mark. Let's briefly look at this effect. First, we switch perspectives. This is its name. This is the interaction name. And what are the triggers? When clicking the marker, selecting and deselecting the mark. The remaining three are all our common triggers. The first three, clicking the mark and selecting the mark. Is that the difference is in selection? When we click on a marker, it may be selected or unselected. But clicking means clicking it. So, clicking corresponds to two situations. So, if you need it, what to do when selecting it? We usually use selection and rarely use clicks. Please pay attention to this. And then below, we can see that it is possible because we now have for data marker points. So we can set them one by one. But generally speaking, I recommend that for this kind of for data marking points, not to set the main item, because data markers may change. Maybe I set these today, but tomorrow my data changes. If it changes for and the interaction of these data, the interaction of data design will be lost. We should default to. We can set the main items for free mark points, data marking points, which should be set uniformly. There is a problem with unified settings, that is, it would switch to his such a, How does the marking perspective work? In fact, it directly selects the current marking group. Note that this target component selects the marking group. We see this is the mark. We call it the mark bottom, although it's called mark 2. It is our marking group. After selecting this marking group, there is a switch to marking perspective on the marking group. Click on it and it's done. But we should note that to switch to the marking perspective, we can also set some other things. First, the distance, the entire thing. How far I am from this marker. Both the horizontal and vertical angles can be set. If we don't want at the current angle, we can change the angle to set it. Everyone can try it. This doesn't have a big impact. We click Confirm. In this way, we have completed a click. To switch the mark. At the same time, we must note that we need to switch to non-edit. To select the mark. Let's go back to our entire, the marking panel. The document of the interaction of the mark. Let's take a look again. As I mentioned earlier, the switching perspective of the mark. Finally, there is one more thing. When we select a mark, we wanted to know who I've selected. And trigger some data linkage or data filtering, or even some other interactions. Today, I will briefly introduce to you how to modify the text to become the name of the mark. This is also a relatively common function. What does this mean? When I click on this tag, I want a text box here. And it says click free mark 2, and free mark 2. And when I click it, it will show modified. The 3 words. So how to do this? First, we add a single line text. Add a single line text. I'll simply set the style of this single line text. Let's make the background more obvious. Otherwise, it will be invisible. Let's make the background whiter. And set the text to a darker color, so that we can see it clearly. At this time, how can I pass the information of my click? The information to this text? This requires us to use a concept called payload in the classic of mountains and seas. The concept of payload is relatively complex. How do we do it first? We double-click to enter our drawing layer and come to the marking point for all our data. All components are the same, although it is like this on the marking point, and the same for other components. Everyone can draw inferences from one example. First, if we want to know, when I click on this thing, when I click on it, what information it covers? Some information. These information can be transmitted. What are these pieces of information? What should I do? First, I add an interaction to this marker group. Just add this interaction. We have already added. Select the marker. If there is no interaction added to this, we can actually select one. For example, when I click the marker, when I select the mark, and then I just put an empty action. I put an empty action. Why do we put this? Because we have a performance optimization here. That is, when I've given it. When we add an interaction, when we click on it, the system will output this information. The information of the click, and some data behind it. Let's clear it. Let's take a look first. We already have the interactive marker points perspective. Let's click it. Click Exit Editing. It has been output here. It says that our marker layer has triggered the selected marker event. And then its payload is these. We can take a look at these. Which one is what we want? We actually want this piece named. Or this name. Or this one, because it comes from the data. This is the data. We can use either of these. But I suggest you use the name, because the name comes from the data. You can choose according to your own options. Then, how do we modify it? We are still here. Double-click to enter. Then select the mark layer. And add an interaction. Then select the label again. And then we modify it. Click on the marker. Then we don't set the main item. All the same. Then we modify the settings. Then select the specified component. We select the text outside. Technical single-line text. After selecting it, we changed the settings. We changed it to text. Note that after changing it to text, there is a small label, which is the current dynamic value. If I uncheck it, then it will show whatever I write here. If it is set to dynamic values, which is the default dynamic value, we can get the things inside. How can I get it? I type a left brace and a colon first. Note that it must be in English. Then enter the payload. Note that there is a payload here. The row below the payload. You must pay attention to this structure. The row below the payload. We click on rows. Then the name below the row. We click on the name. Click to enter the Chinese name. In this way, we will bring the data. The data in the data, the name of this data, will be passed to this text. We click Confirm. We also have an option to synchronize with the previous action. We can also wait for the previous action, and then modify it after the previous action. Let's just look. Let's directly check this synchronization. I click it here. After I click it, see, the word has been changed to modified. I clicked it again. It has been changed to free marking. I clicked it again. In this way, we can pass the data item that comes with the selected. This data item to our text. Of course, can we only pass it to the text? Of course not. We can pass it to many places. The most commonly used way of passing is to pass it to our project parameters. There is a function called modify project parameters. Let's take a look at the project parameters. What are the effects? Let's go to our document again. You can take a look at the project parameters document. In the project parameters, we can have many project parameters. It can be used to dynamically connect API data. That is to say, after we modify the project parameters, it can request the API again, refresh the data, or write SQL statements. After we modify the project parameters, it can use a new SQL statement to access the database again. You can take a look. Here is a SQL statement, such as the project parameters. Of course, we can also directly modify the project components. At the same time, I showed you this just now. We can also interact with the filter component. It can also be directly obtained in the RK code. For details, you can refer to the project parameters. Such a document. You can search for the project parameters to see it. Today, I mainly want to talk about this. Let's cancel it. I mainly talk about directly the form of modifying the text. That's all for today's class. Thank you all.